Thank you for listening to the BjjBrick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back to the BjjBrick Podcast. This is episode 248. This week we have an interview with Eliot Kelly. Eliot is a top-level black belt, and he's also a coach, so he has some great ideas and stuff to talk about competing and coaching and just advice for training as well. Great interview coming up. My name is Byron. I'm here with my good buddies Joe and Gary. Gary, how's it going?
It's going fabulous. How about you?
Doing good. How about Joe? How is Joe this week?
Doing really good, man. Doing good. Glad to be on here with you guys.
Yep, excited for the show. We've got a lot of things to cover this week. And, here we are together. It's like it happens every week.
Every week, yeah. For some reason, you guys keep inviting me. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, actually, he just shows up.
Well, you called me, Byron. I did not. I didn't call you this time.
That's true. That one that was awkward.
Most of the time, I do call you.
It's good to feel like you're welcomed. And in your first year of Jiu-Jitsu, I want you to feel like you're welcome there and you know what you're doing. And if you're in your first year, or even if you're still in the camp of interested in Jiu-Jitsu but not actually doing Jiu-Jitsu, I've made an audiobook called Your First Year of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's $11.99. It's about 2.5 hours long, and I'm going to walk you through all the things, even from finding the right gym, all the way up to if you want to compete, what that's going to be like, and some advice for having the best possible outcomes with that. And the book has gotten a lot of great reviews from people, and have told us that some great feedback. And if you're in your first year or so, or if you're just thinking about Jiu-Jitsu, I really think this will help you out. So, and also the money goes to help support the podcast, helps us keep doing what we're doing. And obviously you like audio content because it's remarkably similar to a podcast, just me talking to you about Jiu-Jitsu your first year. So check it out. There'll be a link in the show notes. You can find it on the website, or Gary, do you know how show notes work?
No, I don't.
On the
they are
app,
just notes. Yeah,
about the show. That's true.
Yeah,
no,
notes about the show.
On the app, who you're listening to this on, Gary's listening to it with headphones and not an app, but everybody else is listening to it on some kind of app, either a podcast app or maybe even the BjjBrick app. You can click on the show, and it pops up with all these notes. It'll have a picture of some things, and towards the bottom of it, you'll find a link to your first year in BJJ, and that's how you can get to it from there. Try to make it easy for you guys, much like I want your first year to be easy.
Yeah. For me, it's in the outline that Byron has sent me to talk about the show. So I have a little hyperlink to 6 games of BJJ, but I don't think you guys get that in your show notes, right, Byron?
The show notes have both of the audiobooks in there, but Gary has special notes for producing the show.
I'm special. Thank you, Byron.
Yeah.
I like to hear that.
Looking on further down the notes here, Joe has a off-the-mat lesson to share with us.
I do. Actually, I've got a couple, but we'll start with this one. So we just got through the holidays, and I hope everybody had great holidays. I had an awesome Christmas. After the Christmas dinner was over, kids gone home, and my wife and I were just kind of chilling at the house, and she was working on her computer and doing something, and she takes a break, says, I'm going to go get a piece of pumpkin pie. You want one? I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. So she goes and gets some pumpkin pie, brings it in the living room, and goes back to work on her computer. She just sets hers down. She goes back to work on her computer. I'm watching the news, and I started eating this pie. the first bite or two, I'm like, man, something's not right with this. You know, they had a good helping of whipped cream on it, and I kind of eat a couple more bites, and I'm trying to figure out what is wrong with this pie. Then my wife takes a bite. She gets this funny look on her face, and then she says, damn it, I think I got distracted and I forgot to put the sugar in here. I was like, oh man, okay, so it's not just me. So yeah, I mean, it was still edible, but it was not what you think of when you think of pumpkin pie.
A little bit too pumpkin-y.
if you were blindfolded and you just ate something, you'd have a hard time putting your finger on exactly what it was, because we're not used to the flavor of pumpkin being really strong in our pumpkin pies because we have a lot of sugar in them. And so a couple of things that I thought about from this experience that kind of relate to jiu-jitsu. And the first is, I thought I get points, husband points for eating that thing and not making a weird face or not saying anything to her. And, when it comes to jiu-jitsu, there's times when it's certainly appropriate for us to offer our teammates advice, and offer them critique on their jiu-jitsu. And depending on where you're at in life, it might even be appropriate for you to talk to another coach or someone that runs a school and say, hey, here's something that I think might work for you. But in general, every critical thought that comes to our mind, we don't have to voice it. If you've got a competitive school across town, there's several jiu-jitsu schools in your area. There may be a few things about that other school you don't like, but you don't have to tell people. Just let everybody stay in their own lane and do their own thing. And so that was kind of the first lesson that I thought of. But then I also thought that in baking, if you leave out a key ingredient, the end product, it might look like what you wanted it to be, but it's not really that product anymore. And so the jiu-jitsu, there's a lot of elements to it, and if you have big enough holes in your game, you need to shore up those weak spots. If you want to say I do jiu-jitsu and I have a complete game, then you need to have some, as an example, would be some ways to get the fight to the ground. If you're a guard player, eventually you need to develop a top game and some techniques from mount. We've talked several times on here about having a couple of techniques from each position. And, you see a lot of wrestlers come in and they have a lot of success, white belt, and they'll even get awarded their blue belt and still not really have a good guard game. And if they want to at some point say, I know jiu-jitsu, it's important that they learn how to play guard and they learn some techniques from there. And thirdly, before I let you guys weigh in and tell me what you think, something that I thought was interesting was the pie was still edible, and it still kind of tastes like a dessert because there was a healthy serving of whipped cream on the top.
Healthy.
And so it is possible. For instance, you could say you need to have some takedowns in order to know jiu-jitsu, but you don't necessarily have to be doing double legs and foot sweeps and judo throws. I mean, it would be great if you knew all those things. But you know what? If you learn an arm drag and a trip from the back and maybe even a guard pull, that's a couple of ways to get the fight to the ground. And it might not be what everyone would consider necessary, but it's sort of like having a pie that doesn't have any sugar in it. You put some whipped cream on, and that is a substitute for. So anyway, that was my experience with sugar-free pie and kind of how I thought it might relate to jiu-jitsu.
Joe, I really liked that. What I really liked was your first one about, sometimes it's really good just to keep your mouth shut, stay in your own lane. And, that's one thing is, I do hear people, talking, like you said, about other schools or whatever. And, I think sometimes it's just good to just go in and train. Don't, you may not like something about the other school or whatever, but, just stay in your own lane. Just, train at your gym, make your gym the best it can be. It's going to make your own practice room that much better. The second part you were talking about, you may have some holes in your game, per se. You want to be a complete grappler. Hey, let me go back real quick to the first time where you were saying sometimes it's good to keep your mouth shut, stay in your own lane. But also, too, I think sometimes, like, when you're rolling with one of your partners and, they're missing something. Let's say they don't have the sugar in their pie. They're missing something on their sweep or their submission. They're not controlling your posture, and you're getting out of their triangle. And on that part, we definitely want to, we would definitely want to communicate to our teammate. We don't want to, be quiet, in that situation. But, so, there's sometimes, you're better off not saying something, if you're going to say something bad about somebody, say something bad about another school, say something bad about another martial art, you're probably better off just keeping it to yourself. But if you do see some holes in one of your training partners' game, it's probably a good idea to speak up and let them know about it.
Yeah, certainly if I had noticed my wife about to put the pie in the oven without adding the sugar, I would have said something.
So we said something. Yeah. Yeah. And, it's probably never good to say while we're rolling, let's say me and you are rolling, we've made eye contact, and then you look at me and say, hey, you're missing some sugar. That's probably never a good thing to say while we're rolling to make eye contact.
Yeah, good one, Joe. I don't know what pumpkin pie without sugar tastes like, but I would guess it's lacking. And
it doesn't taste like pumpkin.
I was thinking of
I got another real quick one for you.
Yeah.
I got a real quick one for you guys. This is just kind of a funny story, but it's also a jiu-jitsu lesson. My previous coach, when he first got to America, his English wasn't very good, and he come to class one day and he was kind of laughing at himself, and he told me he'd gone to McDonald's with a couple of his friends, and he ordered, and everyone was laughing at him. They had to explain why. He said, I'll have a hamburger with fries and a big Coke. But he did not pronounce the vowel sound in Coke like you would in broke or soak. He pronounced it like you would in chalk. and he wanted the biggest one they had. And so what he tells me is he said, little detail, big difference.
And that's the same as jiu-jitsu right there. Little detail, big difference.
Yeah, just change a grip maybe or a foot placement and could make all the difference in the world.
Did he have to use some self-defense to get out of there without getting assaulted too badly?
Well, the funny thing is he's a pretty big, scary-looking guy. We were all laughing about, what was the counter person thinking? Should I give it to him? Or
I'm putting my 2 weeks notice in.
Yep. Anyway, back to the show.
Yeah. Oh, Joe, I wanted to go back to the second point you made about you're missing some holes in your game. You're missing sugar basically, and it just kind of made me think of a brand new person, never trained before, showing up their first day, and they've got the best grappling shorts or the best gi you can buy. They're all taped up. You see them from across the room, and they just look like somebody that's going to be really, really good. And it's just all fancy. And then all of a sudden, you get on the mat, and you just see everything's missing. Because of their, brand new. But that's what I was thinking of when you were talking about that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And even some of us have been around for a while, you can kind of have some of the swagger on the sidelines, and you know all the techniques by name, and you can sound like. You know what you're talking about, you know what you're doing, and it's like that pie that looks perfect. But then when you actually start rolling, it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, it's like if you ever go to Buffalo Wild Wings during a UFC and you just keep your ears open and listen to people at other tables, and everybody is a UFC champion, a bunch of they'll all tell you what's going on and how to do it.
Yep, highest level coaching right there in Buffalo Wild Wings.
Hello, my friends. This is Byron coming at you from the audio editing room. Jumping here before we do the quote of the week. I want to let you know of a prank we're starting with Gary. We're going to have the quotes from people with the name of Gary. And I don't know how long this will last until he kind of calls us out on this. He's going to notice, but we'll see if he catches on or how long we let this go. But just want to let you a heads up. And I'm not going to tell you every time, but you'll notice the names of the quote people are going to be Gary, and we'll have some fun with that. So let's keep going. Well, let's get on with the quote of the week here. The quote is from Gary Vaynerchuk. Without hustle, your talent will only get you so far. With jiu-jitsu, it's the same thing. You've got to work hard. Some people will pick it up at different paces. And it's hard to control who that is. Maybe they have a different background. Maybe they're just more athletic than you. Maybe they've been doing sports their whole life, and you walk in at 45 years old and haven't done a sport since junior high. Some people pick it up quicker than others, but you've got the hustle, the trying hard, the not afraid to get sweaty and to push yourself and to roll one extra round. And are you the student who the teacher shows the move and you go and you semi-pay attention during the move demonstration, and then you kind of peter out and you do it once or twice and then you start talking about something? Or are you the student who gets in as many reps as you can and find ways to put yourself in the same situation while you're rolling and get more practice during your training? You've got to push hard if you want to get the best that you can become at jiu-jitsu. Talent will get you so far, and believe me, no matter who you are, you're pretty talented compared to somebody else. There's people who, like, there's always less talented and more difficult to train jiu-jitsu individuals. So no one's at the very bottom. One person is, and I think we've got on the show. His name is Gary. But but there's always people up there who's just super talented. I mean, some guys and gals are just athletic. They just pick up physical things faster. You show them a technique one time, and they've got it. That's great. But they have to also hustle, and it's how far do you want to get with your abilities. It's somebody who's super talented might get pretty far, but if they push themselves, they would get a lot further. And so you can't control like the vehicle you're driving like completely. Like obviously you get in better shape and do things like that, but you have a certain amount of just natural jiu-jitsu. I pick things up pretty fast, or I have the mind to remember techniques or whatever. But it doesn't matter who you are. If you hustle and you work hard, you'll do better.
Hey, Byron, I know we've had Bernardo Faria on a couple times. Didn't he talk about how it was really hard for him to learn? Was that him that took a really long time to pick everything up and look at him now?
I don't remember.
Okay, for some reason I think it might have been him. If not, I apologize. But, then I look back at me and you started. I've actually got 2 more weeks of rolling than Byron. I started before him. But, you picked it up a lot quicker than I did. We basically started at the same time, but you were that guy, your learning curve was, you were way ahead of me on that. And I just remember I was just like, man, I wish I could pick things up like Byron. That's what I used to tell myself.
Yeah, I've got a young friend. He was actually on the show a while ago, Zach Gill. He's a jiu-jitsu MMA competitor out of Canada. I think he's 17 now. But when he started, he competed in every competition that was available. And his first year competing, like every other month, he didn't score a single point. Not that he didn't win a single match. He didn't score a single point. And that was like 4 or 5 years ago. And now if you look at his competitive record over the last year and a half, 2 years, he's been in some pretty big competitions, and he's always on the podium. Usually he's getting first place, and it's because the guy just never stops working. So I'm sure he's got a level of talent, but the most obvious attribute that he brings to the table is just hard work and hustle.
Yep. Another thing I'm thinking of this quote, without hustle, and, skip the talent part right now, but just without hustle, is I think of jiu-jitsu gym owners. It's it's a tough way to make a living with a jiu-jitsu school. It's not easy. But, we've all seen gym owners who have very successful gyms. And, it seems like that person's always what I call a hustler. I always see him, talking about jiu-jitsu on Facebook, trying to get people to come. I always see them going to local high schools, working out with a gym class or teaching a women's self-defense class, or, I see them at, health fairs, always doing this stuff. I can take Byron's instructor, Jake Fox. I see him on the news with Where's Shane, giving jiu-jitsu lessons on the local newscast. And, you have to hustle to get your gym out there. You have to hustle, to get people in your door. You have to hustle to keep people in your door. You have to hustle to keep everybody happy and satisfied. You have a big group of guys that have already signed up, guys and girls, and you're trying to make everybody fit so they're happy. So, I just, the first thing I thought of when I just heard hustle is I thought of, really good gym owners who are just hustling constantly to provide a great product where, we can all learn.
Yeah, it's easy if you're not really involved in your school. It might be easy to look at your instructor and think, man, what a gravy job, right? He comes in and he teaches class for 2 or 3 hours a night, and that's it. But, man, good instructors that have high quality and high successful schools, you're right, Gary. Those guys are working from the time they get up till the time they go to bed at night. They're doing something to further their school, to further jiu-jitsu in their community. I mean, it's just nonstop, 7 days a week for most of them.
Yeah, and I can remember going back to the BjjBrick event we had last summer, where, we had black belts. Byron was a black belt there. We had Rolly Delgado. We had Tim Sled. We had Jake Fox. And I just remember, them all sitting around talking about how people learn. And it just made me think that, these guys just don't come in and, they were taught how to do a Kimura this way, and they're just going to teach you a Kimura just based off of what they've, how they've learned it. They, just listen to them talk. They actually study the ways people learn and try to make their teaching better so people, soak that information up even better. And I was kind of blown away by that. I guess, I don't own my own school or whatever, but I just thought a lot of times nobody really prepared, that much. They knew what they were doing. But, man, when I saw, and listened to that conversation, I just realized that, these guys are premier teachers. They're trying to put the best product out there. They're trying to make their school the best. They're trying to make their people, at as far as they can get, based off of, better ways to teach. And I thought that was incredible.
Yep, the BjjBrick event, we're hoping to do that again this summer. But that was a quote from Gary Vaynerchuk. Guys, gotta hustle.
What a great name.
Vaynerchuk. Yeah, you're right.
I was thinking the Gary part.
Oh. Well, let's get on with our interview. He is the most interesting grappler in the world.
I invented a way to train BJJ without a partner. After only a couple of weeks of this training, my cauliflower doubled in size. I complained that my training partner was too rough. Many years ago, I invented a guard pass called the Robin. I named it after the bird. The pass did not seem to have much use until the worm guard became popular. Not only does this robin defeat the worm guard, this bird was also early. I don't always listen to podcasts, but when I do, I prefer the BjjBrick Podcast. Stay sweaty, my friends.
All right, my friends, I'm happy to bring Eliot Kelly to the BjjBrick Podcast. Eliot, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm happy to have you. I've seen a lot of your competition videos, and you've got a YouTube channel, and I like to watch you on there as well. But if somebody hasn't heard of you yet, can you just describe yourself a little bit and tell us kind of who is Eliot Kelly?
Yeah, so I'm a jiu-jitsu coach / competitor. I have a school in El Dorado Hills, California, which is just 20-30 minutes east of Sacramento. And this is going to be my 2019. So this is going to be I'm walking into my 11th year of jiu-jitsu. And before that, before jiu-jitsu, I wrestled through high school and college, and a couple years after college, and I just kind of picked up jiu-jitsu more as a hobby. Was looking for something that wasn't golf or basketball. Not that I have anything against those sports, but I wanted something that was a little more, I don't know if competitive is the right word, but wrestling-esque, I guess, because of my love and kind of passion for wrestling. And so I stumbled into jiu-jitsu just by kind of coincidence, and I've been kind of doing it ever since.
When did you start competing?
When I started as a white belt, but I didn't really go into jiu-jitsu because I was looking for, competition. I actually didn't know that there was, competition was a part of jiu-jitsu. I started competing, in 2000 and December of 2008 was my first competition. And then ever since then, I've been competing, a couple times every few months, as long as I'm, been injury-free. This last year, 2018, was kind of an injury year, but yeah, I didn't really get into jiu-jitsu because I was looking for, competition. I wanted to learn new skills. I wanted to learn how to move differently on the mat, differently than wrestling, and just learn what jiu-jitsu was all about, rather than looking to beat somebody or looking to win a tournament or anything. But once I found out there was this competition element to jiu-jitsu, I thought it was awesome. I realized, it kind of opened a new door, opened a new kind of understanding for what jiu-jitsu was for me. So it's been pretty fun.
Eliot, do you have any favorite competition memories or favorite tournaments that you've been a part of?
Man, that's a good question. Every tournament is unique. For me, every tournament is like a unique experience. And so to say, what's my favorite, that's tough to say. I guess my favorite is whatever competition or tournament, I'm in at the moment. But, But it's nice to it's fun and nice to kind of think back and look at, different tournaments and different people that you were matched up with, whether you won or you lost. If I think back, I've had a chance to go up against some big names in jiu-jitsu, which is kind of cool. People that I looked up to or found out about as I started doing jiu-jitsu. I've had a chance to roll with them or compete against them, which is kind of cool. Let's see. But I guess I got to go against Andre Galvao once. I got to compete with Shanji Hibero. Compete against him twice. Who else? Rafael Lovato. Competed with him twice. And now there's all these, big up-and-comers. Those are kind of like legends of the sport, I guess. And now there's these new kind of up-and-coming new guys that I think are going to be, legends or the next greats. It's kind of neat to see that. Buchecha, I've had 2 matches with Buchecha. So, yeah. Again, I can't really pinpoint one tournament that's my favorite or most memorable, but they've all been really good memories, I guess, that I can look back on.
Yeah. Do you remember was there a match or maybe a time or maybe even a belt level where you thought that this is going well for you and you want to take this more seriously?
I didn't really understand jiu-jitsu and the kind of the belt progression until I was a brown belt. I progressed pretty quickly through my belts. And brown belt, I started my jiu-jitsu when I was living in Japan. I was working as an English teacher or as an assistant language teacher in one of the high schools. And that was kind of the setting where I started jiu-jitsu. And in Japan at the time, it was very, very few black belts. Maybe there was a couple in Tokyo and a couple in some of the big cities, but where we were out in the country, I don't think there was any black belts within the area. So we started. I'm trying to think of what your question was. Sorry, forgot. I lost track there.
If there was maybe a moment or maybe even just a belt level where you determined or you thought of this is what I want to do. I'm actually pretty good at this.
Yeah. So initially, white, blue, purple, it was just kind of a hobby. And at the time I was in Japan. When I moved back to the States, I was a brown belt. And I realized, I quickly realized oh, there's all these tournaments and people are coming from all over the world. I'd done one big tournament in Japan. It was called the Hickson Gracie Cup as a purple belt. And, there was people from the Emirates and people from, Japan, Southeast Asia coming up, the Philippines, Hong Kong. So that was like a big tournament, and that kind of like, shook my brain on like, oh, like jiu-jitsu is kind of a global competition thing. I was really, the farthest guys, the people that had traveled the farthest were from the Emirates, and, it was kind of like weird / cool to see guys from there. But I still didn't quite get it until we moved back to the States, and I started doing, the IBJJF tournaments, the Pans, the Worlds, Nogi Worlds, I realized, oh, like this is truly an international, competition. So I think it was like a couple years into me being a brown belt, where, I wanted to kind of pursue it more seriously as an athlete. And then definitely when I got my black belt, that was like something that I wanted to, I wanted to really I wanted to see what my abilities were as a jiu-jitsu competitor, how good my jiu-jitsu could be. And so, it was like another step up, another kind of level up in terms of my focus and training as a black belt. So brown and black, I would say, just because I moved through white, blue, and purple really quickly. I didn't quite have the time to kind of understand and grasp, the difficulty of each belt until I was a brown belt, I think.
Looking back, why do you think you moved through the white, blue, and purple so quickly?
There's a few. I think one, I had really good coaches. My initial coaches. I think I've always been lucky to have really good coaches. My coach, when I was a white, blue, purple, these brothers named Marcio and Michel Miasta. They were these Brazilian-born or Japanese descendant Brazilians who were living and working in Japan, and they didn't hold anything back in their teaching. I think sometimes people tend to hold back information when they teach. But for all sorts of different reasons. You could speculate maybe it's just like insecurity. That's probably the biggest thing. But they wanted their students. They really wanted their students to be better than them and to be the best that they could be. And the way they saw that was, to teach as much as to teach to the best that they were capable of, and to share as much information as they could. And so one, I think I had really good teachers. Two, I think my wrestling experience was, I had like a very high level of wrestling experience, and I was still kind of actively pursuing that as a career. I was coaching wrestling after school at the high school that I was teaching at, and then I was going to a university where I was like a volunteer assistant, mostly training with the wrestlers, and they were second. They were second in Japan as a team, so they were it was a really good wrestling school named Ritsumeikan University. But so yeah, I think having that wrestling background was another contributing factor. At the time, I was really into just learning the technique. So, I think I would go to class and we would practice whatever technique we were practicing, and then we would do situations or we would roll. And during that time, I would try to do as best as I could to practice that specific technique in practice. So I think that was a big, because I wanted to see if it was going to work, if it would actually work. And if it didn't work, I knew I either had to practice it more or I didn't quite understand it. So I was constantly trying to learn these new things and develop myself not as a wrestler, but more as a jiu-jitsu player by learning new stuff. And so I think that helped. And then another thing that maybe played into it was I would have to take a train ride. So from where I lived, I would take 2 trains, and then I would have to walk or jog, 10, 15 minutes. So the 2 train rides would take about a total of 25, 30 minutes. And then it was another like 10, 15 minute walk / jog from the train station to where we practiced. Everybody else had a car. They could meet by car. But I didn't have a car at the time. So I think, and then in the train ride at the time, I had just read a book about visualization and the power of visualization. So I was, before practice, I would just sit in the train, close my eyes, and, sometimes I had music on, sometimes not, but I would think about the technique that we had practiced. So if it was, I usually practice Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or so 3 times a week. And if it was Wednesday, I would think about what we practiced on Monday. If it was Monday, I'd think about what we had learned or practiced on Friday. And I would try and see the technique step by step. And I think that gave me like an extra practice or 2 of the technique. And then when it came time to competition, I just like won the tournaments. As a white belt, I kind of ran through the tournament, and then a blue belt ran through the tournament. As a purple belt, ran through the tournament, and it was just like it was. To my coaches, it didn't make sense for me to be, a white belt if I was like beating people who had been, a white belt for X so many years, or for me to be a blue belt if I was beating people who had been a blue belt for X amount of years and they had like won tournaments and whatnot. So I can't really, I don't know if that had to do with it or not, but that's what was going on. So looking back, that's how I see it happening.
Yeah.
But
It sounds like a combination of a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Yeah, you give credit to your coaches. You even take what seems like a negative is you have to sit on a train a couple of different times just to get there, and you spun that into a positive thing where you were visualizing and actually just you were practicing before you got there or after you got done training and really getting things in your head straightened out, and that's really cool. And then I think competing probably pushed you and got you to and doing well in the competitions. It really showed your coaches that you're ready for the next level and the next challenges that were there. So yeah, that's. Do you remember the name of the book that you were reading about visualization?
Yeah, I read through a few, but one that stood out to me, and I still kind of carry it around. It's called Mind Gym. I can't remember the name of the author, but it's a really, really good book. It's by a sports psychiatrist, and he just goes through his different experiences coaching athletes, professional athletes, and the stories that he encountered or troubles that they had. And there's a chapter on visualization in there, and just really resonated with me.
I'll have to check that one out. At Mind Gym, it's I just typed it in on Amazon. An Athlete's Guide to Inner Excellence is by Gary Mack and David Castevens. So that sounds like a great book to grab and to learn more about learning and performing and to getting better at really anything. But physical sports is what it looks like it's geared at. Cool. Yeah,
there's a lot of like sports psychology type books out there. But this one is like very short, to the point, and it's very like practical, I guess.
So how do you find balance in competing at a high level and coaching? Some people think, oh, it's jiu-jitsu, it's just, but really, when you're coaching, you're not training yourself to do better in performance. And when you're competing, you may not be able to be like the coach you would like to be 100%. So how do you find that balance?
It's a great question. And, it's a constant practice, I think. And the way I see practice ran is, if you, for example, let's say in a gym we have a class and we have 30 practitioners in class that day, all different levels, and one person or maybe two people are getting ready for a tournament. Well, it's, at our gym, we would structure our class for those two people that are getting ready for the tournament. But keeping in mind that everybody else doesn't need to be at as high of an intensity or do the volume that those other people, whatever focus we're focused on doing, whether it's intensity or volume, they don't need to go through that same rigorous type of training. But those other people are essential components, or they're essential people in order for those two people that are in practice getting ready for competition. So we try and find balance where, the competitors or whoever's getting ready for a tournament at the time is being pushed and challenged and meeting the goals of that class, whether it's technical, whether it's, intensity, volume, whatever's, we're looking to get out of that class. And people are contributing to it in the ways that they can. So maybe somebody's hurt and they can't train, but they're there in practice and they can drill. So, they'll be their drilling partner. Maybe you have a new white belt who doesn't know what they're doing, but, and the person's going to go through, maybe go through different partners. When they go with that person, they're going to work on, the competitor is going to work on escapes, escapes from mount, escapes from side control, escapes from the back. And the new person is just working on, holding on to their position and trying to keep them, in that same position. So you kind of have to be creative, but so for me as a coach, I have to go into the practice. If I'm getting ready for a tournament, I have to go into practice keeping kind of having things already thought out, and then going through the same thing. Sometimes it's too much for me to think, or I know I'm gonna try to do less because it's gonna be a tough day for me. So let's say, for example, we have 6-minute rounds. We're doing 5 6-minute rounds, which actually doesn't sound that hard, but let's say we're doing 5 6-minute rounds, and I know I'm gonna try to stop it at 3 because I'm gonna be tired. Well, I'll tell another coach that's there or somebody else, and I'll say, hey, we need to do 5 6-minute rounds. Don't with a minute break in between. Don't deviate from that plan, and then we'll follow through with that. Or and we're lucky enough now in El Dorado Hills, we have quite a few different coaches and people with different experiences. So if I don't feel like I can run a good practice because I'm too focused on myself for a tournament, I can ask somebody else to teach the class or to run a competition class for me to participate in, and that's very helpful, very, very helpful. But as far as finding the balance of being a coach and being a competitor, I think for me, if I go and compete and I do well, it's feedback that, okay, what I'm doing is effective. I can come back and teach these things. I can teach things that I learned. Maybe I got scored on a certain way, or something happened in a match that I didn't quite understand, so I can process that and bring that back and teach that to the students. And if I get beat, and sometimes you just get beat because it was a tough match and you're going to lose. But, sometimes you get beat because of position that you didn't understand. And those are great opportunities for me to come back and analyze the position or think about it, look it over, look at the tape, look it over maybe with some of the other coaches or students, and then break it down to teach that technique, and then learn how to, stop or prevent or counterattack from that same position. So I guess, you kind of try to incorporate the teaching of, let's say, if I'm getting beat in a tournament, then I need to come back and teach that to my students so my students can do it to me to try and beat me with it. And then, if I can practice on them, that's feedback to me that I'm going to be more comfortable in that position where I was getting beat before. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it does.
So,
and I can tell that both are very important to you. You want to compete well, and you want your students to learn and perform jiu-jitsu the best that they can.
Yeah, and could I be a better competitor if I was just focused on competing? I want to say yes, but I couldn't say that with 100% certainty. I think having to coach kind of at times gives me a reason to be on the mat, whereas if I was just a competitor, I might not be on the mat, and it makes me more well-rounded. Thinking about different positions, maybe things that I don't ordinarily do, but I'm going to teach it to my students because their body types or their style dictates that they should learn a different type of jiu-jitsu than what I do. So I think it's good for me overall. Would I be a better coach if I didn't compete? Again, I couldn't say with certainty, yes, because the competitions that I go to helps me bring things back, that I otherwise wouldn't have seen or been exposed to or get beat with or been challenged by. So I think they kind of complement one another to an extent.
Elliot, hearing
those
two comments, would you be a better coach or would you be a better competitor? And for me, my first thought was, yeah, you could be a better competitor if you didn't have to have, the obligations of coaching and teaching. And sure, you could be a better coach if you didn't have to worry about competing for yourself. But you have a very positive attitude, and you're like, well, maybe not. It reminds me of you back on the train. Could you have done better in jiu-jitsu if you didn't have to ride the train? You could just spend the extra time training? Maybe, but maybe sitting there in the train thinking about jiu-jitsu is a positive thing that you've found for yourself, and whatever the situation is, you make it work, and you make it work out in a better way. And I bet, looking at your students, a lot of them are inspired by you or look up to you in ways that really couldn't be done if you're not competing or you haven't had that competition history. I think that it's easy to forget how motivating something like having you in the gym can be, to having people do an extra round or do an extra rep, or how focused they're going to be while you're teaching a technique because, he's really good at this technique, or this is something that he's able to pull off in competition. I really need to pay attention. And those things do affect your ability to coach because the students are paying attention better or they're working harder. They're not all just tangible, how you show technique type of coaching.
Yeah, the students, and maybe they're motivated by me, but I'm definitely motivated by them. They're an encouraging. It's like teaching a 6 a.m. class. Teaching a 6 a.m. class was the worst idea I could have ever done. No, I'm joking, but it's like, but I love our 6 a.m. group because they come in, they work so hard. And they get in and they get out because they have to be someplace, and the only time usually that they can come train is at 6 a.m. And I remember in college we'd have like 6:30 a.m. morning workouts, and oh man, I remember I tell myself, when I graduate, I'm never gonna do this. I'm never gonna wake up this early to work out again. And now I'm up half an hour earlier, running practice with these guys, but. But yeah, my students motivate me too. They definitely kind of push me to be a better coach, because they expect more out of you. So that's, if I'm motivating them, great, but I'm definitely inspired by them, for them to get in and get after it. It's neat to see that.
Man, that's awesome. And I don't, hear that a lot, but that's really cool that you say that and that you feel that. To me, it just speaks volumes about your attitude and your gratefulness to have those students. Eliot, go ahead.
No, I really mean it. I mean, it's I'm thankful for them.
That's awesome. It's occasionally, jiu-jitsu coaches are there to, and the students should feel lucky to have that coach, and that sort of thing. But in reality, the students are the customers, and if they're served like you're doing, and with the attitude of, I'm glad to have you guys at my school. I feel fortunate to have you training with me, and that sort of thing. They're going to get the best possible coaching they can get, and that's great to hear that from you. You mentioned that 2018 presented you with some injuries. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about those and how you're dealing with those?
Yeah, in like January-ish, I hurt it was like a combination of my knee/hip, and I'm not sure which was hurt, but it was just, we were practicing, and then I slipped, and it was just a really incidental, kind of a fluke. And then I was able to kind of work through it, and I did a couple tournaments after that into February, but then I was starting to have this kind of sciatic type of pain. And so I had some problems with that before, so I decided to kind of stop and really take a big step back and just recover from whatever was going on with my body. I have a really good, he's like a strength and conditioning coach on one end, but he also does some like healing stuff as part of his business. The name of the business is One Body Pain and Performance. But my this guy named Ty, he's like really helped me work through this pain that I had in my hip / sciatic kind of pain, and that thankfully started to go away around April, or we were able to work through it and get rid of that, kind of clear up that injury. And then in right before, like a week before, this is our last hard practice before Worlds in June, I hurt my knee. And again, another just, you're training hard, and if you're training hard and you're trying to get ready for a tournament, you're going to expose yourself to potential injuries. We could have been maybe a little more careful, but, so that's something I'm going to kind of think about in the future, but of kind of minimizing the opportunity for injury when we get closer to tournaments. But yeah, I hurt my knee, and so I've been kind of, and that was really bad. I was on crutches for a week, and I thought I was going to have surgery. We kind of went back and forth with needing to have surgery or not. And now, I've been able to come back and I did a couple tournaments towards the end, November, December of 2018. And now I'm pretty good. But yeah, it was mostly, through, June, July, August. July, I was really, actually, when I got hurt, I was worried that I was going to miss out on Worlds. But then in July, I had a kind of a seminar tour scheduled through India that everything was already booked and planned. So I felt like, oh no, what's going to happen if I can't even really walk? How am I going to teach class, let alone roll with these guys? So I was worried about that, but we were able to work that out, and I was able to go and train and teach. So that was a really cool experience. But yeah, it's been a rehab full of 2018, I guess. Just getting back range of motion and building strength back up in my in my legs. It's been kind of a trying year for me. when I got hurt the second time in May, I realized, okay, this is, athletes don't retire because they're because of an injury. They retire, because getting hurt and coming back is really painful. It's painful to get hurt and have to continue to push through that pain and get your body back on the competition side is a lot of work. And to have to do that I kind of went through that twice this year, and it was really trying. It's been really trying for me, but it's good to feel better and to feel pain-free again. I'm happy that I'm in a good place, and I'm thankful for Ty. Ty and he's really helped me out a lot. So.
Yeah, that's great, and it sounds like you're looking at a better year, 2019. Do you have any big plans?
Yeah, this year we're starting off big. We have there's a Fight to Win promotion coming to Sacramento this Friday, and then let's see, there's an ADCC trials, a West Coast trials in February, and I'm just gonna, my goal this year really is to stay injury free and get out there competing again, and kind of working my way back up into, competition shape and that competition mindset. It was 28, the tournaments coming back. I was tentative about, certain positions and attacking, but I'm getting more and more comfortable, with my positions and whatnot. So I never really took time off the mat, but it was different. It was different to have, it was different to not be competing and to not be training with the same kind of intensity and volume that I had in the previous years. So, I'd like to schedule a few trips to go and compete abroad. But I always have to ask my wife. She always says yes. She tells me I never say no, but I always feel like I have to ask her. I probably should. It's probably a good thing that I feel like I have to ask her.
That balance with your on the mat life and your off the mat life. You got to keep both happy. So I think that's a smart move.
Totally. I don't want to come home and find that the locks have been changed.
Yeah, that would not be fun.
No. My family's been very supportive with me as a competitor, and and as a coach too. It's tough not being home in the evenings to do bedtime. We have a 4 and 6 year old, and for a while, like even now, but when they were younger, especially, for her to have to do bedtime with two young kids is a lot of work, and it's kind of hard for me to only be able to do that on the weekends because we usually teach in the evenings during the week. So, but she hasn't. My wife's like a real mother of the year, I tell her. She always finds ways to make it work. So, I've been lucky. I got a great family.
Yeah, that's awesome. And talking to a lot of athletes and coaches, having a stable and supportive family makes a huge difference in your ability to go out there and perform.
Yeah, it does. It's a big part of. I don't like to. If my wife calls me and says like something's wrong, I almost want to pull out of the tournament. I know I can't, but it definitely makes me want to think twice about going out there to compete. It's to have to know that things are good at home is reassuring for me, at least.
Lets you focus on your task at hand.
Yeah, and ultimately you want to, for me at least, I want to know that my family happy and everything is safe and sound. And competition, if it wasn't that case, then I feel almost guilty being at a tournament. Even though jiu-jitsu is like my job per se, I do feel guilty if things aren't good at home. It makes me think twice about my choices.
Yeah, I mean I think that's a smart thing to sometimes sit back and reflect on what you're doing and is it the right thing and then make decisions from there. And fortunately for us, you've been able to compete and we've been able to watch you and enjoy and learn from that. So that's fortunate on our end, and also I guess fortunate for your family that everyone is doing well and you're able to get out there and do that. You also have some really cool stuff on YouTube that I think people should go check out. One of you're a little kind of like a talk that you do. You talk about people following trends and just grapplers just seeing what's next and getting a hold of that. And can you talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on following trends?
Yeah, I think it's good to and I can't remember exactly what I said, but I think I said something about like, be the trendsetter, not the trend follower or something. Basically, it's good to know what the trends are. For example, let's say the 50-50 position is really popular. Or right now kind of a big thing is like leg locks, attacking the legs. That's a very popular thing. So people, but maybe your best game is to go and like take the back and go for the choke and attack from the back. It would be silly to drop your best stuff and not continue to develop your back attacks and just only focus on leg locks because that is cool and trending. And I think a lot of people kind of fall into that trap. The best competitors, their game will change a little bit, but their game, doesn't dramatically change. Their game changes as a result of people, people reacting to your best stuff. So, if you're a back taker, people are gonna react a certain way, and then your game develops or progresses as a result of that. But people kind of get sidetracked into thinking that, if I learn this new technique, I'm going to be able to, beat everybody. This is what's really popular right now. The problem is like everybody jumps on that. And so you never get to, if you never get to actually, develop your best self or your best game, what's true to your personality. And I think there's a lot to do with, there's a lot to be said about, finding a game and developing a game that fits your personality, that fits your body type. People talk about body types a lot, but I think just as important, is like, what's your personality and how does your game influence your personality? And maybe that trend fits your personality. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it goes counter to it. It's important to be aware of what's going on. If you don't know the berimbolo, when it was trending, and you never study it, you're probably going to keep getting beat by it, But if you learn what it is, if you learn how to do it, maybe not so that you can execute it in competition, but just enough to be able to kind of walk through the steps of it, then you're probably going to have the tools to be able to dissect it and stop it, and you have a better understanding of it. But so yeah, I think trends are important to understand and to know that they're coming, but it's also important to know who you are as a competitor or as a grappler, as a martial artist, and stay true to that, and then develop your game based on that, based on those skills that you already have going for you.
Yeah, well said. I if you're at your level, if you're at the top end, if you're following a trend, you're literally behind somebody chasing something, and so it's far better to find that area of the game that you're best at and hit them with that. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Like that's just the way people match up sometimes. A lot. I think for students, if you look back at your, maybe look back at 2018, and what did you work on, or even simpler, what did you work on last month? And if it's like a ton of things, maybe you need to have a little bit more focus. I think when you're starting out in jiu-jitsu, you do have to learn a pretty big variety, kind of get a baseline down. But if you could say, yeah, last month I focused on attacking the back, or I focused on sweeps from the butterfly guard, or something, like if you had something like that, the last month I did this, then you're not chasing all these trends, and you are developing a more specific game, and then you did use that time on the train and think about, okay, my butterfly sweeps have gotten a lot better. Now what can I add on to that? What could I do to personalize my attacks? Because when I butterfly sweep, they may end up in this position, or when they counter my sweep, they tend to do it this way. What could I do next? And try to analyze your game that way. And if you're just following, leg locks or Barambolo this week and this new cool sweep that has a cool name or whatever, none of that fits together very well. And you just end up kind of a confused student, I think, a lot of times. That knows some cool tricks, though, but...
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think a big part of like being good at jiu-jitsu is knowing how things transition, from one to the next. And so if you can focus your attention on, whatever you're working on, you're gonna improve very quickly.
Yeah, that's a big I think a big missing piece that a lot of us are looking for our puzzle, is that the transitional areas.
It's exactly what you said. So if let's say you start a sweep, and you find yourself being stopped by somebody, there's a rebuttal to someone's attack, and then, okay, so this is the rebuttal. Did the rebuttal work? Yes. Okay, so then you have to find a counter argument. Okay, so they stopped my sweep this way, and then I'm gonna go to this second attack. That's gonna give me the sweep based on their rebuttal. Or maybe instead of a sweep, it falls into, I can set up a submission attack. And I think breaking down your game that way. If you focus not on the trends but on your own development, I think you're gonna find success relatively quickly. Than just kind of like picking up bits and pieces of random facts about jiu-jitsu. You're able to build like a kind of a, if you think of it like you're writing an essay, you want to have your introduction and then your thesis and 3 supporting arguments, and so you're working on your essay, right? Rather than just like picking up random facts to throw into a paper.
Yeah, or spending time looking through a dictionary for the most fun words or words that are challenging, like trying to work those into that essay. Write the essay, and the words will show up, and they'll be fitting. You also
the longest, most complicated words. Yeah.
You also talk on your YouTube channel about watching some tape. You have a tournament, you have a match, and you think it went one way, and well, you know how it went, but you think that the experience was this, and then when you watch it from a different set of eyes, or maybe a little bit of time has passed, you see things you didn't notice, or you perceive it in a different way. What have you learned from doing that?
I mean, the biggest thing is you kind of get in touch with reality a little bit better. Because every time, I guess reality is different with every vantage point. Where they say in like I don't know the exact, I'm butchering it, but they say in like in the courtroom where there's like, there's always like 5 different stories, right? Because everyone's story, everyone's vantage point is different. So it's like, what's So then, okay, well, what's truth? What's reality? Well, it's all real. It's just everyone has a different way of recounting or explaining, what took place. But watching the video, maybe depending on your state of mind, depending on how much you know or you knew or you know now, you're going to see things differently. Obviously, like watching your tape by yourself and then watching with a coach who has more experience than you, you're going to see things. Your coach is going to see things differently than yourself. For me, it's an opportunity to get to know myself better. And I like to think of the technique, but I also like to think of, like, what was I thinking at the time? What was I, it looks like I'm being timid here. I see myself being, aggressive. Why was I able to be aggressive here, but not earlier in the match? So I like to kind of dive into, not just the technical side of things, but also, the psychology of the match and what was holding me back and what was, okay, there's, I'm down by points here, I'm winning by points, or I heard the coach say this and my coach was saying this, and it gives you, you can kind of think back and then, the next step is, if there was a mistake, how are you gonna fix that mistake? And it's, even if you know that you made a mistake and you're gonna consciously make an effort to fix that mistake, that's always, you never know if that's gonna happen until you're put into that situation again and again. But the videos it's just an honest observation. It's an opportunity to give yourself an honest observation. And I try to, after every tournament, immediately after every tournament, I try to go back and look at my matches, and to understand, like, what was going on for myself in my mind, what was going on physically, how did I feel? Was I tired? Did I feel strong? And then technically, what was going on? How were they stopping me here? How was this technique working here? But those are the kind of the three things that I try and take a look at when I go back to analyze the video.
Do you think it's more?
How you remember it?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you think it's more valuable for somebody to watch their own video of them grappling, or to watch the people they're going to compete against and watch that video?
Like if they're getting ready for a tournament, you mean?
Yeah, let's just say me and you are going to compete. Am I better off? And like, I'm nowhere near your level. Let's say we were closer. Am I better off watching some past videos of me rolling or competing and seeing, like, fixing my game, or am I better off watching a bunch of videos of you and trying to figure out what you're going to do, or maybe just a combination of the two?
Yeah, I would say, you should know what my tendencies are. Everybody has patterns and habits. So you should know what those patterns are. I like to go into a match knowing if someone's going to try to take me down or if they're going to pull guard. What kind of passes they tend to lean towards, or what kind of sweeps they tend to, attack with, what submissions, they tend to try to fall into or set up. And you can tell that just by watching, a couple videos, or, it's not too hard to really find that out. But I think where you're going to really improve, is in understanding yourself and understanding how you compete, and, again, I think part of the competition experience is, you do all your preparation, you're getting yourself ready to compete, you're practicing your technique, you're getting your, conditioning better through training. And then you have your competition experience, and then there's the post-competition experience where you're looking at what happened, what actually happened, and what went wrong and what went well. And that, I think, is an important part. So that reflection is just as important. But you could do that reflection in the beginning too. If you're, let's say I know some people will have people film them during practice, and you can look at yourself in practice and say, like, oh, I'm using this technique well, but, you know, he taught me this way, you know, and then you can come up with stuff to help you get ready for the next practice. So yeah, I think so I would say spend the majority of your time, you know, if you're going to watch videos of yourself, and improve that. But I also think it's very valuable to watch just basic competition, you know, footage of some of the best guys to learn the technique. You know, I would say, you know, watch the best guys that win your division. You know, if you're at a tournament and, you know, somebody's good, watch them, you know, compete their way through the bracket to see what kind of technique they're using. You know, I would say that's maybe more valuable than watching a technique video. Because sometimes the way technique is shown isn't quite the same as the way it's applied in competition. You know, if you can do both, maybe do a little bit of both, but I would say spend the majority of your time, you know, watching like live action, you know, competition. That's probably the best way to study jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it's a tremendous tool that hasn't always been there, and that might be part of the reason why people are getting better at jiu-jitsu faster and faster is tools like this.
Yeah.
Eliot, do you have any sponsors you'd like to mention? You mentioned your strength and conditioning. Where was that again?
Eldorado, you know, in the city where we have our gym, Eldorado Hills, One Body Pain and Performance, with Coach Ty. He's, you know, he does a great job putting things together for you to do your strength and conditioning, but he also does a lot of like rehab type stuff that's been really valuable for me. I also have a gi company that supports me. You know, they've been very, very supportive. AK BJJ or Armor Kimonos. If you go, I think their website's akbjj.com. They have some great products, but they've been very, very supportive with me and my jiu-jitsu competition, and so I'm very thankful for them as well.
That's awesome. I'll put links to those in the show notes. Eliot, if somebody wants to follow you and keep up with what you're doing, what's the best way to do that?
Facebook. I have a Facebook page, Eliot Kelly Jiu-Jitsu, and I have a personal page on Instagram at Eliot Kelly, 1L, 1T, just like T.S. Eliot, the writer or the poet, I guess. And then I have a website too, and I haven't been as consistent as I'd like to be, but I have a website where I post a blog. I try and do like a couple a week, but when things get busy, I kind of tend to slack off there. So it's all about finding that balance, I guess. But EliotKelly.com, I have a blog there. So yeah, if you have any articles that you enjoy, and if I get some feedback, I always appreciate that.
That's awesome. I'll put links to all that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Eliot. Do you have any final words of advice for the listeners?
No advice, but just thank you. Thanks for having me, Byron. I appreciate your time and you know, platform to share my experience with jiu-jitsu.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing your experiences, and I really appreciate your outlook on jiu-jitsu, and I think you're a great person to have in the sport. So thank you for jumping on here with me.
Thank you.
Man, it was great to have Eliot Kelly here on the podcast this week and to learn from him. And a couple examples that stood out to me. You know, he had to ride on a train to get to training, and it's just like that could be a negative, like a chunk of time out of his day and that sort of thing. But he uses positive, and he focused on training and thought about techniques and organized his jiu-jitsu mentally. So when he got there, his training was more effective, and when he left, he could reset everything and really comprehend what he had learned that day. Turned it into a positive. and that's really amazing. Same thing with is teaching a negative towards your competing skill level? Possibly, but maybe not. Maybe it's a positive. Maybe he's getting motivated by his students and that sort of thing. Man, that's amazing. So thank you so much, Eliot, for the interview. If you're enjoying this show, please share it with a friend, whether it's online or just mention it to them on the mats. Hey, check out this interview or check out this episode of the BjjBrick Podcast. I think you'll like it and you'll learn from it. And that has been a tremendous way that we've grown. And word of mouth, both online and in person, has been great. And it means a lot to us when somebody recommends the show to somebody. And we would also like to train with you. Gary and I are located in Wichita, Kansas, and Joe is usually just south of Houston. Is that right, Joe?
Yeah, I'm about 45 minutes south. So if you're in Houston and you got some time to take a quick drive, come down to Lake Jackson, Texas, and see us there. Hit me up on Facebook. Maybe I can make the trip up to Houston, but would love to get a roll in with you.
Yeah, and go to our Facebook page and send us a message there, or just send us an email at bjjbrick@gmail.com. And if it's to Joe or Gary, I'll get the message forwarded right to them. But it's always good to connect with you guys out there, and the best way to connect is on the mats. Gary, we've got an article on SI.com. What does SI stand for?
Maybe Sports Illustrated.
Nice.
And jiu-jitsu is a sport. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Well, this is wrestling.
There we go. This is wrestling. This article is titled "Olympic Wrestler Helen Maroulis, My Darkest Secret That's Greater Than Gold." And it's kind of okay, I got to read this. What's up with this? And it's a very well written article. It's obviously about wrestling in the Olympics and some of her story. But I was really impressed by what she's gone through and some of the challenges that she's faced.
Yeah, I really liked it. She talks a lot about having some social anxieties, and some irrational fears. And you don't associate those with high-level athletes, highly successful people, especially somebody in a combat sport, right? What do you have to be afraid of? So I like the fact that she was kind of willing to put that out there. And I hope that if anybody is listening to this, maybe you experience the same thing, go check out the article, because it's easy if you're suffering with these kind of anxieties or something to think that that's going to hold me back. I won't be able to be successful or whatever. But she's definitely proved that you can overcome that. And I appreciate her putting it all on the line in this article.
Joe, we talk about, social issues, anxiety and everything. And I think a lot of people have it, even world champions. I just don't think a lot of people talk about it, and, maybe I'm wrong. But, I know I'm not even close to a world champion, maybe a sectional JV champion in podcasting. But, I know, that might be about the
Whoa,
best.
Gary, slow down there, man. We've only been on for like 5 or 6 years or so.
Yeah, but, maybe, but I said in JV, Byron, maybe a JV sectional champion.
Maybe by the time we get to 300 episodes, we'll be up a little higher.
Yeah, but, I've dealt with anxiety my whole life. It's not a fun thing to deal with. And it's funny, as I've started talking about my anxiety to people have come out to me, having the same issues. And, I think a lot of people have it. I just don't think a lot of people talk about it or really tell about it. And, even though Helen beat Yoshida for the Olympic gold in 2016, I don't think of that as her biggest accomplishment. I think of her biggest accomplishment is coming out and talking about her, her social issues or anxiety and fighting that head on. And, I watched her in the Olympics and, she's incredible. She's just fun to watch. She's a heck of a wrestler and, it's a heck of an accomplishment. But, I really think that her coming out and talking about this, writing this article for Sports Illustrated is going to help so many people and make so many people realize that, hey, there's nothing wrong with me. There's other people have this. And, here's my hero, Helen. She's in the same boat. And, so I guess I shouldn't, think that I'm I'm different because of what I'm going through.
Yeah, one of my favorite things in the article, and I wouldn't presume to tell parents when this would be the right call and when it wouldn't be. It's a hard call. But Helen talked about when she started, I think it was junior high wrestling, and that was like a big step for her. And she's in there with just the guys, and she goes in for warm-ups, and then the coach says, okay, everybody find a buddy, partner up. We're going to do some drills. And, of course, everybody partners up, and she's just left being the odd man out. And she goes up to coach and says, I don't have a partner. And he says, you got to find your own buddy. That's the way this works. And so she's kind of scrambling around the room. She can't find a partner. So she goes over to her mom, who was sitting on the bleachers, and said, I can't find a partner. What do I do? And her mom said, Helen, I can't help you, and stood up and walked out. So, it's pretty heavy, I think, reading that. But it was what she needed at that time. And she just ended up going up to two boys and saying, hey, I'm working with you. And, her mom could have stepped in. I imagine if her mom went up to the coach and said, hey, we got to find my daughter a partner. This isn't right. The coach probably would have stepped in and found her a partner. But then she wouldn't have had that. I mean, to me, that seems like huge growth in just an instant. And so sometimes you got to make tough calls, man. And I just like the way that turned out for her.
Yeah, that one really got me too when I was reading that. And, Mom said she sat in her car for 2 hours and cried. It was a rough time. But, I started thinking about that and, wonder what would have happened if anything would have changed if Mom, maybe because Helen was getting really anxious there and not feeling good. There was a chance, maybe Mom could have pulled her out of wrestling at that point. None of the boys wanted to wrestle with her and she wasn't comfortable at that point. And you imagine if just one little thing like that could have led her to be pulled out and never would have been the Olympic champion and never would have been able to touch so many people with this story and help so many people. Kind of crazy. But yeah, that was, that's a great, courageous move for Mom. That's a tough one to, say, hey, you're going to have to stay in here. I can't help you. Turn around and walk away and spend 2 hours crying. That was a rough one.
This is a long article, and there's a lot of things like stories like that. What Joe mentioned about Mom just can't help you. I'm out, and we can't cover them all. One of them that kind of sits with me not quite so good is when she wants to wrestle. She's a little kid. She wrestled as a training dummy for her brother. Was she like 7 or something like that? And she's like, I want to wrestle. And so she begged her parents to let her wrestle. Her dad said, you could wrestle, you get one match, and if you win, you get to continue. And she says that's the only match she won all year. But she needed to win that to get her dad's permission to wrestle. And I think that overall is a bad thing to tell a kid. I mean, obviously it worked great for her. It was the motivation she needed or whatever. But in reality, if he would have said, you lost, you're done. I don't know if that was his plan or not, because there's no way to see that or to see how she reacted. But just because a kid isn't particularly good at something, like a sport, doesn't mean that they shouldn't be doing it, especially if they want to, if they have the drive to do it. And she tried other sports and didn't enjoy those and didn't like them and didn't do well at them. And so she's got passion for wrestling. If she goes out and loses every match, if she still wants to wrestle, I would say let her wrestle. But maybe that's the fire that he thought he would ignite under. I don't know what just seeing that as just a sentence or two in this article, it's like, man, that's kind of harsh as far as if you're not good at it, you're not going to do it. Glad she won that match, but I think if your kid loves jiu-jitsu and they absolutely suck, let him go jiu-jitsu.
Yeah,
like,
go back
no big deal.
Yeah, go back to what Joe was saying about his buddy there from Canada. Lost every match his first year.
Didn't score a point.
Now he's on the podium every time.
Yeah, I like something Jake Fox said a week or so ago on Facebook. He made a comment, said, my son is a mediocre jiu-jitsu guy. He's an okay wrestler, but he's great at being a dinosaur.
That's what it's about.
That's the kind of parental support kids need. And I'll give her dad the benefit of the doubt, like you, Byron, and say that he kind of knew how to push the right buttons and had her best interests in mind. But yeah, that's a call that I would probably not make.
Another thing I really liked about this article is, after winning the Olympics, she got to give a pregame speech to the Baltimore Ravens. And I thought that was pretty neat. And, a bunch of warriors, listening to another warrior there. But I like her quote. And I know we already did a quote of the week, so this is quote 1A of the week. You don't have to be the best. You just have to be enough. And on that day, I was enough. And, that was the day she won the beat Yoshida there to win the championship, win the Olympics. But, I like that. And it's kind of going back to like you were saying, Joe, he's good at being a dinosaur. You don't necessarily have to be the best. Each and every day can you perform at that certain level. But, you think about you may be the best jiu-jitsu wrestler, boxer, MMA fighter in the world in a day where there's no stress or, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But every day is different. You're up in front of, in a crowd with a whole bunch of people cheering, nationalities cheering. You feel like you have the whole weight of your country on your shoulders. And, one person may be better than the other, but how do you perform on that stage in that given day? And, you train all the time. Your muscle memory's there. You blood, sweat, and tears. You're working so hard that nobody ever sees, and they only see that one little day, that one little, 7-minute match. And, you just have to be the best for those 7 minutes. Your diet, so many things play a difference into, how you can perform at that given time.
Yeah, it's a great quote. It's a great way to look at things. It can be really frustrating, I guess, if you're always chasing, trying to be the best. But I guess another way to look at her just being enough. It's like I just have to be the best that I can be today. So that's a great quote, Gary. Good eye, man.
Well, thank you.
She also talks about in this article about being so nervous. She's basically going to she's making herself sick. She's shutting down. She's like, and she's afraid to tell anybody because clearly champions don't have kind of a breakdown right before an important match. And she tells her coach, and he tells her that that's just your body's way of making it like hypersensitive and ready for battle. And if you're experiencing that, tell yourself that this is my body preparing itself for battle. It doesn't really particularly feel good, and I feel like I'm really nervous. Try to make that excited instead of nervous, but just know that your body's doing things that you can't control, trying to prepare you for battle. Now, is it the best thing in the world to come into jiu-jitsu with like 110% intensity? Probably not all the time. Like even in competition, a lot of the high-level people look pretty relaxed. They're pretty cool and collected out there. But to be able to kind of use that and just know that your body's doing what it can, and it's doing it for a good reason.
Yeah, before we move on, I just want to add something. If you're, a parent of younger kids and you're going to jiu-jitsu competitions and whatnot, and even wrestling now, you see a bunch of girls out there, and there ends up being girls-only divisions. When the kids are little, they're mixed, and there's lots of people to grapple with. You might not realize how tough it could have been for her. She's about the same age as my son, actually, and he wrestled in junior high and high school. And that's just when girls, this was 12 years or so ago, 12, 13 years ago. And that's just when girls were just starting to come in and want to wrestle. And, man, I saw a lot of tournaments where guys would forfeit a match instead of wrestling a girl. And so imagine working week after week after week, and half the time you get to the match, and the guy just forfeits, and you don't even get a match. So I imagine it was extremely discouraging, and so my hat's off to her for pushing through.
Very good point, Joe.
We want to thank you for pushing through this episode. Really, if you enjoy the show and you want to help it out and make it grow and get even bigger and better, you can find us on Patreon and support us there. Patreon is a website for content producers like podcasters, and what most people do is they go on there and they'll pledge like $1. We have several people pledging $3 as well, and at the end of the month, all the pledges come together and get sent to us from Patreon. It really means a lot. As a token of our appreciation, we'll send you out a 5-inch BjjBrick gi patch. It's also been called kind of lucky, and we also send you out a BjjBrick sticker. You're invited to the private Facebook group where we'll kind of talk behind the scenes sometimes about jiu-jitsu and what's going on with the show. And if you want to join the private group and you are a Patreon supporter, those two kind of go together, send me an email, bjjbrick@gmail.com. Let me know what your Facebook page is, and I'll get you added in.
Yeah, we've got some good feedback from the private group. Last couple times when we've done our topical episodes, some ideas and some questions, and really appreciate that, guys. It helps us put together a better show.
Absolutely. And I want to give a shout out to a couple of our Patreon supporters, Paul, Christopher, and Michael. So thank you guys for your continuous support on Patreon, and means a lot to us. All right, guys, towards the end of the show, we'll oftentimes throw out a fake book and see where they take it, probably down to the mats. And Gary's been working on an audiobook called Anxiety Ankles, how he attacks the ankles all the while fighting off his own anxiety. It's an audiobook. It's really geared towards getting you past some of those mental hurdles. And I think part of Gary's anxiety is just having to touch somebody else's feet. I don't know. Gary, what's going on here?
Well, it's not necessarily feet, Byron. I have anxiety against ankles. And, it all started when I was a kid.
I apologize, Gary. I misspoke there.
And somebody talked about cankles. And, for some reason, that really threw me over the edge. I don't know why, but it was kind of weird. So I got to the point where, I didn't like ankles. I mean, I couldn't do a low ankle pick. I couldn't do a lot of stuff. And I sure as heck wasn't going to try to, play the footsie game with somebody and, have to touch other people's ankles. And so that really severely limited my progress in jiu-jitsu.
There you go. And as a companion book, Joe has one called Restless Wrists, where he describes why one of his wrists is significantly stronger than the other one. It's possibly a bit restless.
But Byron, you didn't let me talk about my book.
Yeah. I want to get Joe thrown under the bus as well. So go ahead, Gary.
But you can throw Joe under the bus later. But so my big thing, I would sit up at night and just cold sweats. Not wearing sweatpants, I would have cold sweats trying to, think about, have to touch somebody's ankles. So, I mean, it was tough for me to get over it. I mean, it took a lot of tough love. But what I started doing is I started practicing ankle locking myself because I couldn't even touch my own ankles. I mean, I couldn't touch anybody's ankles. So I figured if I could start with myself. And you know how hard it is to ankle lock yourself?
Were you doing this in bed?
I had to get my bottom 2 ribs removed so I could ankle lock myself. I mean, it's that's how much money I paid, how much I meant to me, that I would, go through an operation like that. But, after, practice on my own feet, I then became, not afraid of anybody's ankles. And I don't even care if you bring cankles to an ankle fight. I will still go after the cankles. So, you can solve problems. You just have to have a lot of tough love from your family and friends.
And sometimes it's better if it's intimidating to practice at home by yourself.
Yep. And the good thing is, my upper body is a lot more flexible too. So, I can move in different positions. I couldn't when I had more ribs. So that definitely helps in jiu-jitsu.
I don't buy it, Gary. Yeah, Joe, let's hear about your companion book.
So I have an obsession with good grip strength. I want as strong a wrists as I can get. And I figure that the best way to accomplish this is to find something to just squeeze over and over again. And if you just spend some time squeezing and massaging, you'll develop excellent grip strength. And so my right wrist turns out to be much stronger than my left wrist because I found that shaking hands was the best way to accomplish this.
Is that why you carry around that cucumber everywhere you go and you practice your grip on that?
No, Gary, when I shake people's hands, I just like to latch on. I do the Donald Trump. I latch on, I pull them in close to me, and I just start pumping and pumping and pumping until they, eventually it's like they're like, something is weird about this. And so then they try and get away. And that's when you really start to develop your grip strength. And it's sort of an arm drag motion as well. I got their right hand and my left hand's behind their elbow. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a win-win situation. Develop good grip strength, develop a good arm drag, and you don't usually have to worry about these people approaching you for conversation twice as well. So
that's what I was thinking.
There's always that.
Yeah, I was thinking most of your friends probably keep a good distance, between you when they see you.
Yep, there's always that. Then I have to dive for an ankle pick and work on my grip strength once I get them to the ground.
Yeah. Well, Joe, if you don't really like to touch people's ankles, I can help you with overcoming that fear if you run into that.
Yeah, so that's commonly known as podophobia. And that's what Gary's struck with. He's got a fear of the feet. It's weird and bizarre. However, it's a real thing. And Gary, I'm proud of you for getting through that, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, proud of both of you guys. Great work on your audiobooks, gentlemen.
And
Joe, I didn't know where you're going with that one.
Yeah,
so this wouldn't be complete if we only had 2 books. So Byron,
seems like a fine number.
Tell us about trypophobia. It's the fear of holes. So do you have an irrational fear of holes?
And how that relates to jiu-jitsu, of course. Right.
That was good, Byron.
Well, here's the deal. We used to train near a well. It was like the mat was right near this old well, and our dog was named Lassie. And we get to rolling in a fighting in a rough housing. A couple of times I fall down this hole, and if it wasn't for my dog and maybe the other grappler to go get help, I'd probably still be down there today and in a lot worse condition. Yeah. So I have a healthy fear of these holes. Yes.
Yeah. I remember when you were down there and you used to tell us about there was a guy who would come by like 3 or 4 times a day, and he would have a bucket tied to a string, and he would put some lotion in there, and he'd always tell you it puts the lotion on its skin as he passed that down to you.
Yeah, that guy, what was his deal, man? I don't know. He was really insisted on that.
When you got out, you had the softest skin I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Or I've ever felt, I guess.
Yeah, Gary was that guy. But it's important. So here's how it's changed my game today. When I'm grappling and Joe's got a mount on me, I first, I'm going to roll him to the left. I make sure there's not a well there. Glance. If there's a well, I need to change things up and roll him to the right. And so you just always want to just be aware of your surroundings. A lot of people will not want to roll off of the mat or maybe into the wall, or if there's a support pillar of the building you're in or something like that. I'm checking for wells. That go deep underground to get water typically, and I mean, it's just a safety concern.
We run into that a lot here in Kansas
all the
with
time,
oil wells. Yeah. So I mean, it can. I mean, if you're out in the middle of a field rolling, it could happen.
And it does. So a phobia, but I've also, much like these guys, conquered a lot of it. I'm still afraid of basically all holes, but I've learned to deal with them.
I thought you got out of that fear when you went into prison for 6 months.
So I got thrown in the hole, Gary. I'll say that. That's when you get isolation.
When Byron's doing the old oil check, he's just probing the well to see how deep it is.
Byron, just make sure it's lubed.
Well, it's oil, so that helps.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, man. Well, you never know where these audiobooks go.
Yeah. So next week, tune in to hear us talk about the quote, "It puts the lotion on its skin."
Gary's trying to control these quotes coming up here. That'll be quote 1C. And anyway, stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to put the lotion on your skin.
Train hard, train smart, train well lubed, and you'll get better, guys.
Yeah, I can endorse that, Joe. That's Gary's philosophy.
Wells.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.